Oh, the joys of getting older. This video is about stepping into your highest excitement. So recently I've had certain health issues that have not really hindered me from like working and everything, but have been a cause of concern in my life. And I'm like, oh, this happens when you get middle-aged and stuff, But in my spiritual practice and in my personal belief, I already know that our bodies are not really designed to be in a state of illness or disease. And instead, it is our belief systems that create this state of being for us. When we get sick or we have different conditions, physical ailments that show up in our life, especially once you hit like your middle ages, right? So, my spirituality is a huge part of my life, and I've been exploring over the past month or so. I've been exploring the link between our human physiology and our endocrine system, and blending that with the concept of disease and addressing the root cause of disease, which at its core root is our belief systems. This might sound a little odd, but everyone knows that when you get sick, you go to the doctor, right? So in the past, I used to study Ayurvedic medicine and different modalities of that nature in terms of healing, and that was always very effective. And then the past 5 years, or 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, I've moved on to a different form of healing the body known as Reiki, which is in the category of energy medicine. And I've been exploring many different modalities in relation to energy medicine. Another version of energy medicine would be massage. Massage is very common. Reiki is becoming more common, but still a lot of people don't entirely know what it is, so it's still somewhat esoteric. But anything that uses your own body to heal itself is what I'm categorizing as energy medicine. So other people might look at it differently in terms of energy medicine, and might say, no, it's only Reiki, or it's only, certain things. But for me personally, because this is my journey, I categorize anything that uses the manipulation of your own personal body without external anything, even Ayurvedic means. I personally classify that as energy medicine. So, because we're using what we already have, because Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you. So I'm just using my body. And so that energy medicine for me would include yoga, asanas, stretching, massage, Reiki, things like that. Anything that you can do yourself without the assistance of anything external. Okay, so that happened. Now, in my personal life, I, when I was younger, like many people, you get a skill, and then you hone that skill, and you develop your life around that skill, and that's how you maintain and support yourself, right? And then you establish a certain lifestyle for yourself in which you get comfortable living in, and it works for you. And I was no different from the majority of people, and I did that. What's funny is I've always really admired people who at a young age just kind of threw caution to the wind, and they're like, I want to be an actor, and they just went off and live this life of poverty until they reach their goals, and we have so many examples of that. One of the mentors in this phase of my life and my journey was actually Jim Carrey, and it was like he knew as a teenager what he wanted to do, and he just followed that path. And he said, you have to choose your hard. So, I kept focusing on that before I had left my job a couple of years ago. So, I've been I shouldn't say battling, but I've been bouncing back and forth between really knowing that I am actually, to be honest with you, very well cared for, but I want more money, you know, and I've looked at that and I'm like, why do I actually want more money? Is it a habit? It's because I'm used to having more money. So yeah, the answer is yes. I'm used to having more money, but even without money, I have all of my provisions, I mean, and then some, taken care of. I'm not wanting for anything. So there's just very few things in my life that are different as opposed to having money and not having money. And I think, yeah, I mean, it really doesn't ultimately matter because I'm like, I still have so much, and I know I don't want for anything. So maybe it's just a bad habit. Not a bad habit because money is good. Um, it can do some things for you. But it's embracing that new understanding in my life that I don't actually need money, And certainly since I left my job, that's been a lesson that I've been learning. Well, first I was like, no, I need money. Then I had to go through that turmoil for like a year. And then as things began to fall more into place, as I began to put myself first, things began to fall into place. And I realized, oh, wow, I actually don't need money. I mean, everybody needs money to sustain themselves. But when you close yourself off to the abundance of the world, and in my life, people disagree, but in my life, which is heavily governed by my spirituality, there's a tremendous amount of abundance in this world. Because when I was learning Ayurveda and using that, I realized how very little of any type of herbal medicine or even a treatment, even if you do like a Reiki treatment, you can heal yourself within 5 minutes. So you need so little time and commitment to your personal self, your personal goals, your personal desires, anything you want to do you need so little time and commitment in order to be able to satisfy your life and to sustain yourself. Okay, so fast forward, I'm living my life. I decided to take, a job that for me is low paying, but it's not in my field. And it's just something that I enjoy doing. And, I do it. I still work for myself. I just clean houses. So I still work for myself doing that. And then I also have a mainstream job doing the same thing. But the mainstream job doesn't pay much. So, and I've been comfortable with that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm still good. I still save. I still invest. I mean, the increments are smaller, obviously, but I still do all the same things that, every person should be doing. The book of Ecclesiastes talks about diversifying your assets, and that's always been something that I've embraced. So yes, it's on a smaller scale, but you don't want to lose your habits completely, right? So I still do all those things, and I'm like, I have so much, and, so anyway, I realized today that I have been living almost in like a fast forward mode. Some information came through for me about within the past week or so that I need to start focusing more on being patient. And I realized that I was feeling like I needed to catch up because at my age, it looks on the surface like people have it all together and their life is all, whatever. And for many people, it probably looks like that for me. But it's like I want to build this whole new career for myself as a writer. So that is the wonky side that no one really sees because I'm working on that privately, and I have my website and everything, and I'm working on a project for years now, and it's like been so slow in moving, but at least it's moving, like I'm working on a project that consists of 13 different perspectives, for example, and I'm on number 8, right? So it's moving, it's moving. So, but it's not like finished, and I realized that I want to be like finished. I want to be in my new life. I want to be there already, and I'm like, at the same time, I know I can't be finished because it's a process. Just like building a house. You might want your house to live in right now, but it takes time to build, You got to think of the kind of house do you want? A traditional house, a sustainable house? What kind of design do you want? What kind of rooms? You have to hire an architect, and you have to hire people to do all of the designing, and you have to find the land. And for some places, you have to instill the means of getting water because every place doesn't have direct plumbing. So in some cases, like the town I live in, some places have direct plumbing like where I live now, but then there's other parts of the same town that don't, and you have to have a well, to get your water and stuff. So anyway, the point is, obviously, a lot goes into building a home, for example. And in the same way, a lot goes into building a career, And I didn't realize it, but I've been holding it over myself. I just did some shadow work. And I've been holding it over myself, and I've been feeling out of sorts because I have not been embracing my truest passion. I'm like, oh, you know what? Why don't I monetize this other skill that I have and make money that way? And I'm like, after everything that I've experienced, at the end of the day, I am not standing fast in my faith and in my knowing that I will always be cared for. And why is that the case? Like, I literally vlogged about this, I think the end of last year or earlier this year, when I recounted like the previous year's experience, like in losing my house and how synchronous everything was, and even why that needed to happen, and what I learned from that experience, and the synchronicity in giving it all back to me and piecing everything back together in this beautiful way. And it was just so loving and so giving, and it just showed how supported I am by the universe. And yet, a few months later, I'm like, ooh, do I need to make more money? You know what I mean? What happens is we have these secret thoughts in our back of my mind. And sometimes a person might voice that to you. And we tend to, say to the other person, oh, no, you shouldn't say that kind of thing. But the truth is, because I was thinking about that this morning, that one person said that to me. I was related to the person. And it was my daughter. You know how freaking kids are. But she's looking at like the obvious, like, oh, you're this age. Why don't you go back and get some more money? And she's been like looking for jobs for me and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be trapped in a cave in a cubicle and crunching numbers. And I lived that life, and I don't want that life. And I have never regretted my decision. It was challenging to make things work. But now I've learned how to be a real live entrepreneur, and I've learned so much in the process. And so, I wouldn't throw that away for anything in the world. And I know the path that I'm on. So it's never something that I regretted, because even it took me 1.5 years to leave my job. So I knew, and there was a lot of spiritual work and unpacking that went before that, because I was like, oh my God, how am I going to leave my job? So, I did a lot of unpacking, and I just said, to God or the universe, I just want to not be afraid. Whatever trajectory, whatever winds and twists I have to go, I just want to not be afraid. And so that was what I had. I was just so excited to leave, and it was just like I was on cloud 9, And then I left, and then of course, like the real unpacking, the reality, begins to set in once you run out of money or once you're close to running out of money, right? So anyway, so all that happened, and I probably talked about that at some point in a previous video, and whatever, last year happened, everything happened as it needed to happen. And anyway, where I am today, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I developed like some middle age concerns that a lot of women have, but I treat myself Ayurvedically, and I use different energetic means and stuff like that. But I'm like, at its core, what am I missing? What am I missing in my life that even generated this kind of condition? Because I've literally been living like a 32-year-old woman in my head forever. So, what has changed? And it was a very subtle shift in my perspective, super subtle. And I just want to share with this, and actually I probably should title this Shadow Work. Yeah, I'm going to title this Shadow Work. So I'm not going to share my whole writing session and whatever, but, you can unpack shadow work in any way that you see fit. But I had to make a comparison between my highest excitement, which is writing, right? Which is not currently generating any income for me, right? And things that I enjoy to do, like cleaning, I still enjoy it. It's less fun than writing, but I still enjoy it, right? So that's why I ended up being a cleaner now, right? And so with this new thing I was starting, I was like, this is a huge part of my life. This is related to my spirituality. I love this, right? You see how subtle? It's something I love. It's something I would say is almost a 50-50 passion to my writing. But my writing is directly related to my fulfillment in life, you see. That is really what brings me my highest excitement. Because for all this time, I've been like, well, it's really between writing and my spirituality. I love both. But today when I was unpacking all this shit, I was like, you know what? I don't love both equally. Because sometimes you really just got to sit with your emotions. And I've been feeling like so dense lately. There's been other stuff going on, family members in the hospital and my bunny rabbit not feeling that well and all of the things and whatever. And just unpacking all of these things. And I was just like, this morning I just woke up and I'm like, I don't want to do not one single thing. I don't want to do any healing. I don't want to drink, I usually get up in the morning and I drink like some apple cider vinegar and I have my water. I do some yoga. I start my day. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to sit with this density and just breathe. So it started with breathing. Then it turned into some light stretching. And then I started getting some kind of words coming through. And I said, okay, let me just start journaling. And depending on what kind of, I keep two journals. I've said this before somewhere else, but I keep two journals. I keep a written journal and I keep an online journal, depending on, if it's like really backed up. And I can type really fast. So if it's really backed up, I have to type it out. I'm like, where's my computer? And if it's not, then I can write it out. So I already had my paper right next to me. So I wrote it out and it all just kind of came flowing out because I've been searching for an answer, and Jesus always said, when you search, you will find. And so here, it came to me. While I was sitting with these different emotions about my spirituality, which is so near and dear to my heart, and also writing, which is my passion in life, that previously I'm like, yeah, I kind of love them equally. The truth is I don't. The truth is I really love writing a little bit more. Writing is directly related to my fulfillment in life. It's directly related to my goals that I have for myself. And my spirituality was and always has been a part of my life since I was a little kid, before I even knew that, what I know now about spirituality. There was an innate sense of self that I always tapped into since I was a little girl. And that has really been the driving force that has sustained me my entire life in everything, even after I got into religion, even through leaving religion. I didn't know it at the time, but I really leaned into my spirituality, having a lot of conversations with God when I decided to leave religion. That was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life, because my life revolved around my religion. And, I thought, religious people always tell you, leave us, you're leaving God. Not true. God actually gave me a lot of clarity on what was the right thing to do in that case, and I stepped into it. Anyway, this video is about the subtleties of shadow work. So anybody who does shadow work, or if you know anything about it, a lot of people are moving into that space now. And for anyone who doesn't know, shadow work is unpacking different kinds of traumas in your life, or things that are, basically you have something that's unhappy in your life. You would like to find some sort of clarity or happiness, and you tap into a side of yourself that is something that you deliberately do not address in your life, or sometimes you don't even know that you're not seeing something. You know something's off, but you don't know what or where. And when that happens to me, that's when I bring in a second party, because usually people look at you differently than you look at yourself. So that's all shadow work is. It's becoming very popular nowadays because mental health is so popular. And mental health has a different name for it. They don't call it shadow work. I forget what they call it. They call it all kinds of stuff, healing trauma or whatever they call it. In spiritual circles, we call it shadow work, right? And that could be anything from you know, your mother used to beat you, or it could be, sexual violations when you were younger, or it could be, major stuff or minor stuff, depending on how you choose to look at it. It could be like even something like following your dreams, Like, for example, there's a song called Hungry Heart by Bruce Springsteen. And I remember this song. I remember when it came out, and I I always think about that song. And it starts off with, I got a wife and kid in Baltimore, Jack. I went out for a ride, and I never went back. Like a river that don't know where it's flowing. I took a wrong turn, and I just kept going. That's an example of what happens when people reach the middle of their life, and your humanity becomes more real. Like, you're not going to live forever at this point, right? And at 20, I was like, yeah, I got forever. At 40, you're like, yeah, I don't know. And so, and now I'm in the later part of the 40s. And so, those things become more real in your life, And the meaning behind that song is you following your heart, Most people would say, yes, it's wrong to leave your wife and kids behind. And I'm not saying it's right, but I am saying he was following his highest excitement in that case, because he'd probably been denying himself many pleasures of life. In the song he says, you lay down your money and you play your part. In other words, you committed, you play out this commitment, but in the end, you're not really living true to yourself. And that's why these kinds of things end up happening in our lives, And that's the benefit of shadow work, because it will reveal, like, why did I leave my wife and kids, when I love them, because you have to follow your heart, and maybe there was another thing that was meant for you that you have not pursued, and whatever, you get the idea. So that's what shadow work is. It's unpacking traumas that we've experienced in our life that become more apparent later on in life. Usually it starts in childhood, and then we tend to ignore most of it in our 20s, being like, that's just life. And then, in later years, it can really start to weigh heavily in on us, or start to take shape in our body in the form of disease. And so in the unpacking of these normal conditions that happen to women my age, my maturity level, I know that there's a deeper meaning behind it. And so in unpacking that, I just wanted to share the subtleties of that. And for anyone that's done a lot of shadow work for like a long time, this is for you. This is like the super subtlety of how we can get caught up, and even in these cycles, because I'm like, why am I having this again? So this is what Spirit had me write out. Do you want to write, or do you want to create videos? Because I love YouTube. I love creating videos and all that jazz. And it's like 50-50 what I used to tell myself. It's really 50-49. I want to write, and then I want to create videos, just a little bit less, right? Do you want to write, or do you want to focus on your spirituality? Now, this one I had known already for some time. I put a 50 for write and a 49 for my spirituality. Then they said, do you want to write, or do you want to make money? And I'm like, ouch! That one hurts. So that one is, obviously now I can see it, it was deep in there. And I didn't even answer it. I was like, I just wrote, my preference is to write. And now I can see that my fear, obviously still present, is not having money. And they said, well, therefore the choice is yours. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. The choice is always yours. And I know what choice I'm going to make, because I've had so many examples in my life. I always kind of like, in these moments, I look back, and I'm like, I see all the times that since I was a little kid, since I was a teenager, all the ways in which Spirit has guided me in my life. And it's like, even throughout this whole process of redefining myself, and I had to sit with that energy too. I'm like, okay, you're 47 years old. Literally no one, because everybody knows me, and everybody that is close to me knows how, they would say, like, I'm a perfectionist, I'm super thorough, I research everything. Like, people know that about me. I am not the type of person that would generally just up and leave a job without having another one secured, and, make rash decisions, and, live the life of an actor. I never did that in my life. And I always regretted it. And that's why I always admired people who could do that kind of thing. Because I always took, like, the practical route, and, and so that's what I've done, but I've always wished that I hadn't. I always wished, whatever. Now at this age, I'm like, it's time to stop wishing. It's time to start doing. When I die, I want to be like, yes, it is done. I don't want to be like, man, I wish I would have did this and this and this. I don't want to wish I did nothing. Okay, not a thing. And so this is really the time to step into that space and really and truly own it. And I've done that, obviously, but there are times when you're almost, I didn't feel like I was stuck. I really didn't feel like I was stuck, but I was manifesting an illness. And I'm like, why the hell am I manifesting an illness? I look on the bright side of things, and not because I want to avoid things, because I truly am a positive person. And the stuff that I think I want to avoid, I'll sit with those energies and unpack it, and I will integrate it and move on with my life, And but sometimes it's called shadow work for a reason, because it is really in your shadow. The stuff that I can see clearly, yeah, I'll address that. For the most part, I'll address it. And the stuff that I can't, I'll bring someone in, or I'll ask God about it. And I have been asking that God about it, like, what am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? And sometimes you got to relax enough, Like, I've been up since 3 a.m. It's now 7:37 in the morning. And doing a whole bunch of avoidance shit, really. And after spiraling around for hours, assigning myself things to do that are not important at 3 in the morning, I was just like, I can't anymore. I was like emotionally tired. And that's when I was like, let me just sit. I didn't even think anything would come in. I was just like, I want to sit and just breathe. I don't want to tune in. I don't want to tune out. I don't want to be the wall. I don't want to do nothing. I don't want no Reiki. I don't want to do that. I don't even want to lay down. I don't want nothing. I always have my yoga mat out. But I'm just like, I just want to sit and just be. I don't know anything in this moment. My brain is spent. My emotions are spent. I just am done. And I'm just like, so anyway, that's when I just sat here, and then, I started breathing. I have this timer that's a 1 minute, a 3 minute, a 5 minute, and a 10 minute. So I just breathed for 1 minute, and then I flipped it over to 3 minutes. I did 3 more minutes of breathing, and then I flipped it over to 5 minutes. And I did 5 more minutes of breathing. And while I was doing that, and I said, whatever happens, happens. I'm not forcing myself to do, I'm not forcing myself to sit and breathe for 5 minutes. If I don't, I don't care. Whatever comes up is coming up. So in the midst of the 5 minute breathing then I started stretching, getting some energy into the body. It was just happening. And then that's when, the words started coming to me, and that's when I started journaling. But I just want to share this because, shadow work is deep, man. It is deep. And so sometimes we just don't see it. We just don't see it, no matter how much shadow work you do. And you got to unpack it in whatever way that is. For some people, they might be able to, like, create artwork and then look back at what they discover and then be like, oh my God, this is like the answer I've been searching for. You know what I mean? It will come out in different ways, but because I'm a writer, for me, I write. And so, that's it. It's super subtle. I redirect myself back into making money again, monetizing spiritual gifts that yes, I love it, but it's not my highest excitement. And I was making all kinds of excuses for myself, too. The past few weeks, I was like, well, I want to do this anyway, and I have a long-term goal, which is true. All of these things are true. I have a long-term goal related to my spirituality. This is true. Basically convincing myself that this was the right path for me to take right now. And I knew something was off because I took, like, my writing things. I was like, let me focus on my spirituality first, and then once I start making more money with that, and then I'll go back to write. I actually convinced myself of that. And I don't know, I felt this kind of melancholy sense. I put my, writers, we usually are surrounded with papers and journals and all kinds of research and stuff like that, right? And I just packed it all away and put it on the bookshelf. I put it in like eye level, but still, I just felt like, oh my God. And I'm like, you're not going anywhere. I still see you. I'm just got to do this first so I can make money. And then once I make more money, then I can just write full time, which is my goal. I want to write full time, right? But now it's not making me any money. So, I'm doing these other things, but I feel like I'm kind of tired of cleaning. I mean, how much cleaning and vacuuming can you do? It's like I love it, but, it's getting kind of redundant at this point. So I'm like, change is coming, and I convinced myself that this was the necessary change, when the truth is this was not really the necessary change. Necessary change for me to have more patience, have more faith, and to continue writing. So, I say all that to say, we can deceive ourselves and convince ourselves that of the rightness of what we're doing, when subconsciously we know damn good and well that ain't what we're supposed to be doing in this given moment. And I have this pain in my lower right quadrant, and I have, I study human physiology, and I study a lot of different things on the side, and I have like this whole amazing like grid thing of, pain in different areas of the body, and just the abdomen all, and I'm like, I haven't been able to find it, probably for this reason. So anyway, I'm still sitting with this pain now, and like I said, I mean, you can believe it or not, I don't care, but that's what I believe. Our pain and suffering is directly correlated with how we feel about something. So that's why I've been blending the two of these things together. And so I was like writing, and I was just like, did it spontaneously. I was like writing, and then my pain subsided. Even now I'm doing it. Now the pain is gone. And then I'm like, make videos on my spirituality. And then the pain comes back, even though I love it. It's not 50-50, it's 50-49. And so it's crazy, and that's, but yeah, it's just this really subtle shift where it's like writing, and I'm thinking of writing, and the pain goes away. And then I focus on it. So, and I will just end this to say, I don't know, because my father's in the hospital now, whatever. There's something in the medical field. I worked in the medical field also for a million years. I started, since like I was 18 years old. And then I left to go make money, and then I went back through a different venue and back into the medical field and remained there for a million years. So I know it very, very well. So it makes sense that from there you'd move into Ayurveda, and a lot of, that those fields are blending back together now. But anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this is in the medical field, when people are on hospice or end of life treatment, sometimes they will experience what's called a spontaneous, what do they call it? Oh, I just forgot it. They call it spontaneous remission. And so basically you're on your deathbed. You're about to die any day, any week, any day. You're in the hospital. And then all of a sudden, poof, you're healed out of nowhere. So medical science does not have an explanation for this. So they call it spontaneous remission. And they always discharge you like, oh yeah, it could come back though. Don't get too comfortable. Whatever. When the truth is, I mean, if you're spiritually conscious, then you know this. If you're not, then you don't. But if you are, then you already know that our illness, our disease is directly correlated to how we feel about things. When a person is in that condition of spontaneous remission, it's because in that moment they've chosen to relinquish all of the bullshit that has created the disease in their body in the first place. This is why when you do energy work, in particular Reiki, or really it could be anything, it could be stretching or whatever, but when you do energy work like Reiki, then, you open yourself up to the energies that surround us, and that person, as a willing participant, wants a healing, and you're opening yourself up to the universal energy to allow that healing for them, right? And they really just allow it for themselves, and you just open themselves up as a channel. Every person can do this on their own, but many people just haven't learned how to do it, and so they just ask somebody else to do it for them. And I did that myself before I became an energy worker, energy practitioner. So anyway, every human being has the capacity to do that for themselves, whether they know it or whether they don't know it. And that is the reason why, that coupled with relinquishing all your bullshit, like you make you dead and be like, you know what? Because a lot of times when people are at the end of their life, the shit that you thought mattered doesn't matter anymore. You know, the arguments, the fights, the it could be anything, the racism, all of the stress that we pile onto ourselves with our beliefs, which create this disease, it doesn't matter anymore. And for the ones that can truly unpack all of that, like, oh my God, I just wasted all that time. You know, I could have been doing something else. Let me get a new lease on life, and it'd be a whole different story. For those people that can do that, when they're on a deathbed, it magically disappears. It's not really magic. That's the way our bodies are designed. But it's done. You know, it is done, literally. And that's what spontaneous remission actually is. So one thing that you can use, you know, in the midst of your doing shadow work, and I don't know, it's probably beneficial for everyone. You probably don't need to be experienced in shadow work in order to do it. So I'll just throw it out there. Think about the thing that you think you're avoiding, or whatever your issue might be, and especially if you have like a pain in your body, and just lean into it and look at what you really want to do and see the difference in that subtle energy. See what that feels like, you know, and whichever one feels like you are fine. That's the answer for you. That's the best path for you to go down. Now, of course, you are the Christ consciousness. You have choice. You can always choose to do whatever you want to do. You know, God will never begrudge you your decisions. They might alert you, hey, if you go down that road, you know, that might not be where you want to go. But they're never going to force you to do anything, because life is about experience. And if you feel like you need more hardship in order to drive home a point, then so it is. So there you go. There you have it. I just wanted to share that because this was like really, God, something. And, you know, I'm just reading what I wrote. I literally wrote like, ouch, and then try to avoid it. Well, my preference is, you know, whatever. So the point is, there it is, you know, this is life, and this is like what it can be like, you know, and we don't have to criticize ourselves. I know this, I'm saying this for you. I'm also saying it mainly for me, but also for anyone else this resonates with. We do not have to criticize ourselves, you know. At my age, I'm starting over. So I literally wrote out this whole like grid. I was like, okay, when I was younger, it took me 4 years to get an education and a good 10 years to hone in my skill, right? So at least let me do 4 years of education and 10 years to hone in my skill. So I wrote those different skills that I was trying to obtain. The first one is writing. And I'm like, okay, this one's actually already done. Okay. So, so I wrote that out. I said 4 years to develop. I actually already did that. That's what kind of started me on this path. This was like, my daughter was still like in middle school or high school when I started this. And I wrote, okay, that's already been developed. And I've honed it, you know, because I went back to college back in 2017. And then I was, one of my goals was to become a stronger writer around that time. And writing has always been my best subject anyway, but I had been out of school for a long time, and I was like, I want to get back to how good I used to be, you know, and then even get even better. So I've already done that work, and now I am in what did I write? Time to create, time to commit, you know, and so, or recommit, because I already started my blog, and I've been writing, whatever, but it's not consistent. I need consistency, obviously. For me to maintain my happiness, I really need to be more consistent with my highest passion, you see, and not allow all of these other distractions that are ego related to get in the way. So with that, I will end it there, because I don't know how long is this video, like 39 minutes. Okay, I got a 3 and a 9. So I'll end it there, you know. Stay strong. Stay questioning, and stay kind to yourself, and love yourself through every aspect of your personal experience in your personal journey. Okay? All right. You are loved. Have a good week.